guys smell that? Smells good. I mean, I don't even know if y'all are going to be able to listen to me preach with all that great smell of barbecue. By the way, shout out to Danny's Barbecue. They smoked all of the meat that we're going to be eating today. And if you can smell it, or if you've ever had Danny's Barbecue before, you know it's amazing. And so we're going to be enjoying that. You at home, I'm sorry, but there's still time. Hit the gas. You can still be here by the time we start dinner. Unless you're out of state, well, maybe we'll mail you some. Just send us an address or send your address to Pastor Aaron. We'll let him handle that. Anyway, we're glad that you're here. We're glad that you're a part of this great service. And what a joy and honor it is for me to be able to stand here today and to share God's word with you. I've been excited about this Sunday because I know that God has something powerful in store for your life, for my life, for us together collectively. And I can't wait to see what God does in each and every one of you. The technical revolution. We all like our technology. Some of you got your smart devices. I encourage you, even now, share what it is that you're watching online. You can go to our page. You can do that. But what's cool about the technical revolution is that at any point, at any time, you can get a phone call. At any place. Maybe that's not something that's really awesome to you. But at any place, at any time, you can receive a text message. And if you're lost, all of our smart devices now have these really cool thing called GPS. But how many of you know that your GPS is only as good as your ability to get signal to your phone? Have you ever been in a place where you needed signal and you didn't have it? Have you ever been in a place where you're trying to move forward, but you feel kind of paralyzed because you don't know whether to go left or right or straight or back? You don't know which direction to go. I've been in that situation more times than I like to think. I've even got GPS in my car, but after a while, the roads get a little outdated, does not always aware, and so sometimes you're stuck, and you need current information. You need now information about how it is you're going to get through whatever it is you're trying to get through. Our text this morning kind of brings us to this place of intersection. It reminded me of a story. Some months back, my family and I, we were in the mountains. We were driving across the Blue Ridge Parkway. Beautiful. If you've never done it before, you need to do it. It's gorgeous, particularly at fall when we were making this drive. It was sick. The leaves were lighting up with the colors, but we were driving along the parkway, and I could see in the distance that the sun was getting ready to set for the night, and I started to think to myself, I'm kind of in the middle of nowhere. Looking down at the gas gauge and going, uh-oh, we need to turn back and to find our way to where we're going. And so we turned the car around. Well, first we took a picture. Then we turned the car around and we start to drive out. And the sun is setting. It's setting fast. And before long, it is pitch dark. The only thing that you could see was the occasional glisten of the eyes of the nocturnal animals that had come out to see who the fool was that was driving on this road at this time of night. There wasn't a car anywhere. And I couldn't know where I was at because I was in a place I had never been. And so I start talking to my wife. I said, quick, get your phone out. And she goes, well, pull it up on the GPS. So the car GPS didn't have a good route, wasn't even aware of where we were at. And I said, no, you got to pull up on your phone. She goes, I don't have signal. I'm like, oh. So I'm just driving. I said, well, keep your phone on. So I kept asking her, look now, look now. She's getting tired. Finally, she gets 2 bars. And I said, quick, punch in the address. So she does. And all of a sudden, it says that we were going to turn in a road. It was just 2 miles ahead. And I was like, yes, finally. So we make this turn, and everything is great at first. Everything is wonderful. The road is paved. It's gorgeous. And then all of a sudden, we started to notice a little bit of rumble underneath the tire. We're on gravel. It's like, okay, I can sport some gravel, but it's very dark and you can't see and you don't know where you're going. And so your speed is now like maybe 5 or 10 miles an hour. And then the gravel turns into dirt and potholes. And I'm going, Lord. And I start getting upset with my wife because she's the one who sent us down this route. You want to kill romance in your marriage? Start blaming your wife for problems that you told her to help you with, and she's giving you the help that you asked for, and then be angry about the help she's giving you. If you want to add romance to your marriage, that's the way to do it. Said no man ever. Said no man ever. So We're driving along, the road is getting more narrow and more narrow, barely enough for the car to do. You could see the trees scratching up against the side of the cars you're driving. I'm going, who in the world marked this as a road? This is not a road. Lewis and Clark couldn't even drive on this thing, man. It was that bad. It was so bad. And my wife, she rolled down the window, and I said, well, why are you rolling down the window? She said, maybe I'll see better. I said, no, roll that window up. I think I hear banjo music. You got to roll it up. So we're going along, and I'm like, my goodness, where in the world are we? And just as we've been on this road for miles and miles and miles, I noticed in the distance the glisten of one little light, and then two. And then we happen upon this gorgeous, beautiful neighborhood in the middle of nowhere. I said, thank you, Google Maps. Thank you, Jesus, that we didn't die. And thank you, banjo crazy people that couldn't find me fast enough. I mean, it was a beautiful, beautiful day. Sometimes when we're on a path and we don't know where we're going, we need the help or some guidance from someone that knows where the heck they are. Have you ever been in a place in life where you don't feel like you know exactly where you are or how to get out of where you're at? We've all felt stuck before because of the circumstances. Maybe the job is starting to get a little bit more stressful than you like, and you don't know how to navigate through it because you need the paycheck, but you also need the change. Or maybe the relationship you're in is feeling a bit strained of late, and you're struggling in that relationship. Maybe you feel in life that you've just hit a rut and you can't find your way through it. This is where the people of God find themselves. They had been in Egypt for generations, and they cried out to the Lord, God, please, if you can do anything, deliver us from these Egyptians. Man, they scourge us with whips. They own the crops that we grow. They own our livestock. We have nothing in this land except torment and problems. And because God's a good God, he begins to answer their prayer. But usually I have found in my life at least that the answer to prayer comes through the tough work of change. We have to engage the change, so to speak, if we are going to have a different outcome. And sometimes that can be very, very difficult for us because we as people don't like change. But sometimes change is necessary. When you're not feeling well, you need to go and seek the advice of perhaps a doctor that can tell you at least maybe what's going wrong in your life. You hear a strange sound in your car, it's time to visit the mechanic. Your life is derailed, it's time to have a visit with Jesus. These are those types of moments, but often we don't really want the change. You go to the doctor, says, your blood sugar's high. You are pre-diabetic, and so what do you come to church? You come to pray. God, heal me of these diabetes, not so I can be well, but so I can keep eating cake, God bless it. And that's the reason why we want God to really just answer the prayers that keep us where we're at or keep us comfortable and keep us steady. But the transformation of life comes at the cost of real change, substantial change, inner change. The kind of change that can lead towards a different kind of future. Israel was crying out, but now the stuff of change was getting a little tumultuous. I mean, they're having to face the sea for crying out loud and need God to part it to open it. They're stuck in a nation and need God to bring the plagues, but all of that made them uneasy because it was such rapid fire change. Have you ever been in a place where it feels like everything that's moving and the changes that are happening at a speed that you can't keep up with? This is where Israel's at. But now, things are about to get real. The beauty of all of those prayers that they had prayed for generations are starting to culminate. They're at the cusp of receiving the blessing that God had in store for their lives. They're going to walk in victory. And God says, send these leaders from these tribes. And it was the leaders of all the tribes, one from each tribe, to go and explore the land. You're no longer going to be slaves. You're no longer going to walk in the same kind of turmoil that you used to. I'm going to give you a whole new place to live where you can grow your own crops, raise your own cattle, and raise up children. This is going to be your inheritance. And you can imagine there's a lot of anxiousness and excitement, but they send these 12 out to go and explore the land to find out if it is indeed everything that God said it would be. And their phrase, the way that they would describe the best life that they could imagine, was that that land would flow with milk and honey. For us, it may be chocolate and, I don't know, whatever else you like to eat. But in this world, that's what it was like. When it was all right in the world, it was going to flow with milk and honey. So they go and they look to try to attempt to seize the dream that God had in store for their life, to seize the promise that God has. But there's going to be some bumps along the way, like there often is for us. Sure, each and every one of us pray for the promises of God in our lives and believe in it. We believe that God is a God of peace and we ask for it. A God is the giver of joy and we desire it. That God is himself the essence of what true love is and we are in pursuit of it. But all of those pursuits and all of those desires and all of those promises come at something that is at least in part very sacrificial for us. And that is our comfort, or the ability to move beyond where it is that we feel most confident. The Israelites had been helped so far, but now there's something ahead of them that they hadn't thought that they would see. The land is there and the path is in front of them, and it's going to be very, very difficult for them to receive what it is that God has. And in Numbers chapter 13, you hear and see the story. I want to read it for you today, and we'll read just a few verses of scripture, and I believe it'll be life for you today. It's changed my life, and I know it'll do the same for you if you'll open your heart and hear what it is that the Lord is saying to you today. Numbers chapter 13, and we're going to start reading in verse 26. They came back to Moses and Aaron and the whole Israelite community at Kadesh in the desert of Paran. There they reported to them and to the whole assembly and showed them the fruit of the land. They gave Moses his account. We went into the land to which you sent us, and it does flow with milk and honey. Here is its fruit. But the people who live there are powerful, and the cities are fortified and very large. We even saw descendants from Anak there. The Amalekites live in the Negev. The Hittites, Jebusites, and Amorites live in the hill country. And the Canaanites live near the sea and along the Jordan. Then Caleb silenced the people before Moses and said, we should go up and take possession of the land, for we can certainly do it. But the men who had gone up with him said, we can't attack these people. They are stronger than we are. And they spread among the Israelites a bad report about the land that they had explored. They said, the land we explored devours those living in it. All the people we saw there are of great size. We saw the Nephilim there. The descendants of Anak come from the Nephilim. We seem like grasshoppers in our own eyes, and we looked the same to them. I find stories like this very interesting because I feel that their intersection with our own lives is so prevalent all of the time. They have a clear and present promise from the Lord that they can possess the very thing that God said that they could. But the leaders that are leading these tribes are sent out and they explore the land, and the first thing that they do is they start to spread a bad report. Why? Because fear of change, fear of having to a moment of confrontation, fear of all that lies in front of them is so great that it keeps them from stepping into the best that God has for them. We all know what that fear looks like because usually, as people, the only time that we actually begin the process of change is when we have to. You lose the job, or the stress is so great that you've got to change the job. You are in a marriage and you don't really start dealing with it until things are out of control and the insults are flying across the living room. You got to control the spending, but until the bank reads insufficient funds, it's like we keep spending more and more and more. The stuff of change requires pressure. And here pressure has brought them to the brink of a promise. The promise that God has. This is your land. I'm going to give it to you. You know, the same God that brought you out of Egypt, the same God that parted the sea is going to help you to possess it. But then they survey what it is that they see. And they think to themselves, yeah, we can't fight this fight and win. If we go in there, they're going to crush us. Did you see who's there? And I find that this is true for all of us. God gives us a dream to prosper, a dream to build happy homes, a dream to be the kind of church, the kind of people that He's called us to be. But somewhere in between the promise and the realization of that promise comes the moment where that dream comes into conflict with reality. So what do we do when we're faced with this kind of calamity, when we're facing these kinds of struggles, when we feel like we can't really press through to where it is that we need to be? The first thing you got to do is you got to silence the haters. The haters are everywhere. They're in your life, they're in my life, and those haters mean to keep you from the blessing that God has. This is what's going on in our text. The haters are there saying, we can't do it. Did you see? The descendants of Enoch are there. Enoch was this man that was of giant size, that he was renowned for his fierce warrior nature. And they were afraid because they saw people that looked like that descendant and said, I can't win that fight. Have you ever been in a place where you feel like there's no way that you can win? Where you keep having the same arguments and they never resolve? You're trying to get your health under control, but man, you just can't really seem to break through. You're trying new things with the kids, but it's just not coming around, and they're still struggling. And those haters begin to speak to you and keep you from God's best for your life. Haters will tell you everything about your life and all the reasons why you can't. And you've got to be careful with the haters, because everywhere that you look, there's always someone that's going to try to hold you back from the best that God has for you. You can't do that. And the hater will try to hold you back based on their impediments, based on their weakness, based on their struggles and their inability to move through. Whether that hater can sometimes be a loving parent, or that hater can be a spouse, that hater could be your kids, that hater can be anyone that keeps you from pursuing God's best and keeps you from the path of change to bring you into what it is that the Lord has for you. You know, the worst thing about haters is when they're right. The truth of the matter is those haters were directly telling the truth about what was waiting for them in the land that they were hoping to possess. They told them the pursuit about their size against these vast armies, that the cities that were there were fortified, that they were devouring the land. Indeed, they had passed through the land, and all of that land provided. It was all there, just as God said. And yet, the one thing that the hater doesn't remember is that God was with them. And the same God that delivered them from Egypt with the words and the prophecies of Moses was the same God that was going to bring them into breakthrough. And that's what you need to recognize today. The key to your breakthrough, the key to walking in to what it is that God has for your life is not contingent upon you, or how strong you are, or how powerful you can be, or how eloquent your words can match what it is that you're thinking in your head. None of that is relevant. It all matters. That only thing that matters is that God is with you, and that He's walking with you, and that He's fighting for you. And you've got to fight the voice of the haters. They're around you all the time, drinking that haterade, chewing on hater tots, eating hater chips. They are around all the time doing what haters do, because haters are going to hate. I'm just telling it like Jesus, maybe Taylor Swift, but I'm telling it like Jesus would. We have to recognize that there are always those voices. But you know the hater that you need to silence the most? the one inside your own head. Listen to that phrase again. We seem like grasshoppers in our own eyes. How many breakthroughs have you talked yourselves out of? How many times has healing been right on your doorstep and you walked away from it? How many times has the miracle promotion been limited because you would not ask for it? How many times did suffering continue because you didn't believe that you could? We survey the land and we feel the daunting presence of all the voices that are telling us to stop. And haters are really good at telling us the truth about ourselves and about our limitation. But they forget to tell us about the God that's with us and that can bring us through every single time. Growing up, I played ball. I love playing football. It's one of the things I did. And one of the teams I was on was actually pretty good. We had an 8-2 record, and we were going to the playoffs. But our first playoff game was against a team that had totally blown us out the first time. And as we're sitting there on the sideline, getting ready for the game to start, the other team, they walked by us, and they had this chant that they'd made up, kind of like this old fierce warfare. They had like the drum beats going, and they're taunting us, reminding us of how bad they'd beaten us the time before, taunting our players by name. They took the time to learn who we were. And they were naming all of the ways that they had beat us before. And we tried to drum up our own cheer, but we weren't ready. It was lame, man. I can't even offer it for you in church, but it was lame. And so finally we just said, you know what, we just need to shut up and do our talking on the field. But something about that taunt caused something else to rise up inside of us in that moment, because we did not want to be who they said that we were. And though we were outmatched, and though they had more strength than we did, they had more skilled position players than we did, we went out and we took the field, and you know what? We took down that giant that was in front of us, because there was something inside of us that had decided that day that we weren't going to be the losers that they said that we were. And that is what was in front of Israel in this moment. That's what Caleb is trying to say to them. We can take this land. The lone voice, apparently just he and Joshua, maybe two of them, are the only ones that say, no, if God has met us so far, then he'll bring us through. And I want to tell you, if you are alive and you are breathing in this place today, God is not finished with you. And all he is waiting for is for you to say, yes, God, I will trust you to help bring order into my crazy family. I will trust you to lead me forward into the blessings and breakthrough you have for my life. I will trust you to lead me forward. I will not believe the reports of the world. I will believe the report of the Lord. Amen. Which means they had to do one more thing, and that is to wait for signal. Something that doesn't necessarily come easy to us. As I was talking about in the beginning of my message, waiting for signal to receive direction at that particular point was very frustrating because the night was so dark. It felt very unsafe. I didn't feel like I could get through. But this is a dark moment for the Israelites too. And in times past, they'd been taught when they needed water for God to provide it, they would pray and they would seek the face of the Lord. But here, there's no waiting for signal. Ever been somewhere and need to make a call and you got no phone signal? This happened recently. I don't know if it was some solar flare or something, but it knocked out all of the cellular service in our whole region. And what was really frustrating about that is that I had signal or lines on my phone, but I wasn't able to get the signal to connect. And in that space, trying to work out my signal deficiencies, I was very frustrated because I couldn't get a hold of my family and they weren't home when they said they were going to be. And in that vacuum, that space, anxiety began to grow inside of me. Did something happen where they were in an accident? I haven't heard from anybody. And the enemy began to do some work in that space because it had been more than an hour and a half after the time that they were scheduled to be home. There was also some other problems going on in some other areas of my life, and I was waiting for some opportunity for resolution, but in that space, when there was no signal, it was hard for me to manage that space, and a lot of anxiety started happening. I'm starting to try to use old school methods and using landlines to make calls, but if everybody's cell service is down, a landline still ain't going to do you no good. In those spaces, those trouble places, waiting for signal is important, and that's really what needed to happen here for Israel. To wait to hear from God, for God to break through the silence, and he's trying to. In the voice of Caleb, he is channeling his own voice and saying, we can do this. But amidst all of the chaos and all of the voice of all the other haters, the ground around them began to feel less certain, and so they began to doubt that they could do it. Having signal and making sure that you can communicate is important. It's important to be able to listen to God and to be able to take the time to digest what it is that the Lord is saying. But when our spiritual lives are out of balance and we're not receiving signal because life has become so stressful or the demands upon us so great that there's no time for stillness, no time for prayer, no time to seek God, no time for praise, then the enemy does all kinds of work in that vacuum and fills it with frustration, anxiety, depression, and fear. And when we're in those spaces, it's really difficult to know what it is that God wants us to do. This is where Israel's struggle is. And we can imagine why they're struggling. Because it's very difficult to make progress in a world where we're not quite sure of what's coming. And this is exactly where it is for them. They're all back. They're not asking, hey, Moses, what should we do? These 10 leaders are spreading a bad report. And in your life, there have been several times where there's been people around you, even well-meaning people, that have sent a bad report to you about your limitations, about the ever-presence of the addiction that you're never going to be able to kick, about the frustrations that you feel in your own skin about your life and about where it's headed. And these broken places can be very difficult to manage, as we see in this text. But if we'll listen, if we'll tune in, we'll hear the voice of the Lord coming and speaking to us at the very same time, reminding us that he is with us, reminding us that he has gone before us. When my phone finally received signal, I had voicemail after voicemail, and I was worried and anxious for nothing. How much of your life do you spend worrying about things that never happen? Research tells us over 80% of the things that you worry about never happen. Over 80% of what you're currently concerned about and worried about and pining over 80% of those things never happen. And yet, those powerful forces continue to be the ebbs and flows that dictate the outcomes of what it is that you do. Because you're so consumed in those confusing places that you miss the voice that you most desperately need to hear. What Israel needed to do was wait for signal and to wait for God to speak to them clearly in that moment. After, the third thing that they had to do was they needed to change. Now, change is a funny thing. When I talk about change, and I even talk about change in someone's life, the first thing that they want to do when there's pressure on is like, well, I need to change them. Like, if we got pressure in my household and I'm fighting with my wife, I want to change my wife. If I'm fighting with my kids because they're acting crazy, I want to change my kids' behavior. When I'm frustrated with church because pastor preaches too long while that barbecue smell's going on in the background, I want to change my church. We want to change our clothes. We want to change our hair. We want to change our job. But that's not really where change happens. We need to change us. For Israel to possess the promise, they had to go through a substantial inner change to change the core of who they are. Well, people say, but you don't know how crazy my spouse is, Pastor. Have you heard the way that they talk to me, man? They're disrespectful. You can't change them. The only power of change you have is in you. You are the power that can change you, and God is the power that can change you. You guys together are a powerful force that can bring about the kind of change that can yield the life that you want, but you've got to be submissive to that type of change. But that's not the kind of change that we normally look for. We're always looking for God to change our circumstances, but what God is most concerned is changing us. Israelites are there, and 10 spies say, we can't do it. And so for 40 years, get this, baby, for 40 years, they had to wander in a wilderness to change the mind of the people of God, that they could walk and possess what it is that God has for their lives. And some of you have been wandering in your own wildernesses, some for even longer than 40 years, because you've not let God come into your heart and do the hard work of change inside of you. But if you want a breakthrough, the change has got to start within you. To be the change means to start that change and that work inside of you. And so for years, for a generation of 40 years, a bunch of people are wandering through the wilderness until God says, are you ready? Because I've got the promise for you. Do you believe that now's the time? Because it's waiting there for you. I was talking to a woman, not from this group, but a woman, she came and she was speaking to me, and she said, Pastor, I need prayer. And I said, well, okay, well, what are we praying for? She says, Pastor, I had to leave my marriage. I said, why? He goes, well, but the husband I chose, he was abusive. I said, yeah. I said, that's very hard. I understand. And I said, and then she says, I don't know what it is. It's like I got a curse on my life because this is now my third marriage. And every man that I've married has been an abuser. Every one of them. They abuse me, Pastor, and they say mean things. I said, man, I'm sorry. That's terrible that you've walked through that. I can't even imagine the pain that you're in. I said, but I need to ask you a question. She said, what is it? I said, and this is going to be the key to your breakthrough. I said, what is it about you that chooses men like that? You need to change that. What is it about you that has the world that you now have that you so hate that you need to change? Because we want our circumstances to change without really changing the functional substance within us. Always trying to change the external, thinking that somehow that's going to yield happiness. And to be sure, for a moment it does. But until we go with the Lord and do the hard work of changing what's inside of us, change will never really take hold of our lives and will never possess the great promises that God has for our lives. And for so many, I see that that's where they're at, is that God desires to bring you into an amazing future. He desires to pour out blessings too great for you to contain. But until we're willing to do the work of change ourselves, we won't see it. And we've got to fight those voices inside of us that keep us from those changes. Because the fight to live well, the fight to live more loving will cost you vulnerability. The cost of living more generous will cost you resources. And the cost for a breakthrough will likely mean that you've got to make some decisions about you and about how you handle situations that will bring you into the blessing that God has for your life. And that's really where the impasse is for all of us. It's that we're not willing to do that work. we're willing to change everything around us that doesn't affect us personally. But if we'll engage that personal change, we will see the breakthroughs that God has for our lives. This is the case with Israel. Everyone in that generation, 20 and over essentially, died not seeing the promised land, except for two individuals. One of them named Caleb, you've already heard him saying, yes, we can indeed do it. And what was really cool, he's getting ready to take the mountain of Hebron. And he says, I'm just as strong and just as vigorous at 85. Because he knew that the strength that he needed to take the mountain was not contingent on his brawn or his muscle, but contingent upon the God and the power of God that's with him. He said at 85, I can still take the mountain. I can still take the blessing. I can still receive the breakthrough. And some of you have ruled out the breakthrough in your life, and you're much younger than that. Baby, it's time to possess the promises, because God is all the strength that you need and all the power to bring you through. A whole generation died and missed it, but a new generation rose up, and they took old fortified Jericho without raising a weapon, with just a shout of praise. I wonder if we could just get a little bit of praise inside of us, what God might do through our praise in the midst of our struggle. Beloved, that is what we are on the cusp of, and I believe that the world is waiting for people that will radically live into the truth of this kind of breakthrough, knowing full well that that breakthrough is in hand. We need to allow God to come in and change and shape us. Worship team, if you'd come and join me on this platform. I was talking to a pastor friend of mine. He was telling me a sad story of something he had gone through recently. He said, Pastor, I need to tell you. You know, my wife and I, we've been trying to have babies. Been trying for years, and it's just not worked out. So my wife says, well, maybe something's wrong, And he said, I spoke to her. The husband speaks back to the wife. He goes, yes, something seems wrong. You should go get yourself checked out. It's like what every man says. You should get yourself checked out. She goes to the doctor, and she finds out she's fine. When there was no one else to look for to bring about the change, he knew that he had to go to the doctor himself. He goes to the doctor, and the doctor says the two words that no person wants to hear when they walk into the office. It's cancer. And he said it seemed like in that moment all of the dreams of what we had planned as a family were literally crumbling before my eyes. Because I'm not a man of tears, but I broke down in the doctor's office. I didn't know where to go or what to do. I didn't know whether to believe, if even I had children, that I'd be able to spend my life with them. Those words just hung there. It's cancer. With that ellipsis, dot, dot, dot. I'm a praying man, so I went home and just began to beg God, God, what do you have for me? I believed my life that you were going to use me and that you wanted me to raise children in this generation, and now I find that I'm the reason our family can't have kids. He's heartbroken, he's crushed, he's broken. But that ellipsis began to change, those dot, 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 that God, he felt like God was still speaking. And so he asked others around in his church to pray for him. He said, I'm the one who's normally doing the praying, but now I'm needing people to pray for me. They said, my church gathered around me and they prayed. And I felt something. So I went back to the doctor. The doctor ran this now the third scan after the second opinion. But he's unsure of what he sees, and so he orders a fourth scan. You see, the third scan came back that the cancer was gone, but he couldn't believe his eyes because he's holding it up next to the other one. And then he grabs the fourth scan now, and he's holding them all together, and he says, I can't explain it, but the cancer is gone. And then just about the time that he was finishing up with the doctor, his phone rings, and the signal is on the other end is his wife, and says, baby, you're not going to believe it. We're pregnant. In one moment, in one word, in one opportunity, he was willing to engage the problem. It was him all along, but the power for breakthrough was also in him all along. And the God that was still speaking said, it's cancer, but now it's healed. It's barren, but now it's pregnant. It's broken, but now it's whole. I know you're facing some struggles today, and I know you got stuff going on in your family, and I know that there are trials that you can't see your way through, but I'm telling you that there is a God that's with you, a God that's in you, that is the power for your breakthrough. And I've seen him move the mountains, and I believe he's ready to do it again. I don't know about you, but there's some praise rising up in my heart right now, because I believe that some of you today are going to receive the breakthrough that you've been asking God for, that some of you today are going to see God show up in a way that only God can. I wonder if we could stand to our feet right now. Come on, stand with me. Worship team, can you bring us there? Come on. Let's sing it. Let's sing it. I seen him moving. Let's do it. Yeah.